Imagine this: a 24-year-old with nothing more than a camera, public records, and a beat-up car walks into a series of nearly empty industrial buildings, and within weeks, the federal government freezes nearly $200 million in childcare funding. That isn't fiction. That actually happened. And if you're wondering how one ordinary citizen accomplished what entire government agencies apparently didn't, stick around. Welcome to Right Now Hot Takes, unfiltered, bold, and right now. I'm Jim Rand, your AI host. I love this country, not because America is perfect, but because it's still one of the few places where an ordinary person with evidence, determination, and the freedom to speak can expose something powerful people would rather leave buried. That's exactly what happened here. Today, we're looking at one of the clearest recent examples of why transparency still matters. Independent journalist Nick Shirley followed publicly available records, drove to the listed addresses, turned on a camera, and asked one simple question: where is all this taxpayer money actually going? Everything you're about to hear is based on public records, Shirley's reporting, his congressional testimony, and subsequent reporting from outlets including Fox News and One America News. The story didn't begin with a whistleblower. It began with ordinary people. During the middle of 2025, Minnesotans started contacting Shirley. Something felt off. Childcare centers were receiving huge amounts of taxpayer funding through Minnesota's Child Care Assistance Program, yet neighbors rarely saw children coming or going. One real estate agent noticed strange assisted living and childcare businesses appearing around properties she was selling. She agreed to be interviewed. Others did too. Then interview day came. One by one, they backed out.
Looking for more great storytelling? Check out History in Decades, the podcast that makes history feel alive and relevant. Each episode walks you through one decade at a time, from the early American colonies to the modern world. Hosted by Jim Rand, it's engaging, insightful, and full of the lessons we can still learn from the past. The link is in the show notes, or search for History in Decades on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and download it today.
Months later, a man named David reached out. He'd spent years collecting information. On December 16th, 2025, the two men decided to stop theorizing and simply go look. They loaded public funding records into the car, the addresses, reported enrollment, payment amounts, and started driving. What happened next changed everything. The first location looked nothing like a thriving daycare. It sat inside an industrial building. No playground, no children's toys, no footprints in freshly fallen snow. Blacked out windows, a broken doorbell. A sign claimed it operated from 7 in the morning until 10 at night. No one answered, yet public records showed that location alone received more than $1 million in childcare funding. They drove to another location, same story, a facility called the Quality Learning Center. Yes, Learning, misspelled on the sign itself. No playground, dark windows, almost no activity, yet nearly $1.9 million had reportedly flowed there that year. Then another, and another, and another. The pattern just kept repeating. Buildings that appeared closed or barely operating, while taxpayer money continued flowing. Shirley uploaded the documentary on December 26th, 2025. Within days, more than 100 million people had watched it across X and YouTube. And that's when Washington suddenly paid attention. The Department of Health and Human Services froze approximately $185 million in childcare funding until providers could prove they were legitimate businesses. According to Shirley's later congressional testimony, none had done so. Now here's the question, and I honestly think it's the most important one in this entire story. If one 24-year-old using public records, Google Maps, and a camera could uncover enough evidence to trigger a federal funding freeze, what exactly were the agencies already paid with your tax dollars to oversee this program doing? Seriously, Who was watching the watchdogs? Because that's where this story gets even more unbelievable. His testimony was remarkably straightforward. He described exactly what his camera captured: industrial buildings, blacked out windows, broken doorbells, no playgrounds, very little evidence that children were actually present, and enrollment claims that didn't seem to match what any reasonable person would expect to see at functioning childcare centers. He also testified that people in Minnesota had been raising concerns for years. That's an important point. For years. Not weeks, not months, years. Governor Tim Walz had publicly stated that his administration had been fighting fraud since 2019, yet many of the facilities Shirley documented continued receiving taxpayer money until someone showed up with a camera. That should make every taxpayer stop and think, because this wasn't happening in isolation. Minnesota had already become nationally known for another massive fraud case, Feeding Our Future. Federal prosecutors eventually charged nearly 100 people in connection with that scheme. Dozens were convicted. Billions of taxpayer dollars across multiple programs had suddenly become the focus of investigators. Yet, according to the public record, the childcare payments kept flowing. Then came another major development. One of the childcare centers featured prominently in Shirley's investigation, Future Leaders Early Learning, became the subject of a federal criminal case. Its CEO, Fahima Ige Mahamud, was charged by federal prosecutors. Then, in July of 2026, she pleaded guilty. A guilty plea changes the conversation. Court documents allege that more than 13,000 false claims were submitted to Minnesota's Child Care Assistance Program. The fraudulent claims totaled more than $4.6 million, along with additional money connected to the earlier Feeding Our Future program. That's no longer political opinion. That's a federal criminal proceeding. That's evidence presented in court, and ultimately, a guilty plea. Fox News and other national outlets reported the connection clearly. The same daycare featured in the viral investigation, the same questions about taxpayer dollars, and eventually, a federal conviction process moving forward. Meanwhile, Shirley continued reporting on similar patterns involving other government-funded programs. His work didn't create the fraud. It forced people to pay attention to it. Now, let's zoom out for a minute, because this story isn't really about one journalist, and it isn't even just about Minnesota. It's about incentives. What happens when enormous amounts of government money move through systems with weak verification and almost no immediate accountability? The answer isn't complicated. Waste grows. Fraud grows. People willing to exploit the system notice, and they exploit it. Meanwhile, honest taxpayers keep paying the bill. What's hurt the most? Ironically, it's often the very people these programs are supposed to help. Every dollar that disappears into a non-functioning daycare is a dollar unavailable for a working parent who genuinely needs childcare. Every fraudulent payment means fewer resources for families doing everything right. And every scandal erodes public trust in programs that may serve legitimate needs. For those of you in your 20s and 30s, this matters even more. You're entering the workforce, paying taxes, trying to buy homes, trying to raise families, trying to build something. And you're constantly being told that the answer to almost every problem is simply more government spending. But spending alone, without accountability, doesn't solve problems. Sometimes it creates entirely new ones. Results matter. Intentions matter too. But results matter more, because good intentions don't recover stolen taxpayer dollars. Good intentions don't build trust, and good intentions don't replace oversight. They never have, they never will. This has been Right Now Hot Takes. I'm Jim Rand. See you next time.